Sharon Wiley. We speak so often of brokenness in religious life. Let us speak today of wholeness. You are welcome here, all of you. Every part of you beautiful, just the way you are. Here you do not need to be something more or something less. No holding back, no hiding, no exerting yourself, no trying to do more or be more. You have inherent worth and dignity. Nothing to prove here. Nothing to prove to me or the person sitting next to you or to the children or to anyone. You don't have to try and be witty or more quiet or more outgoing. You are beautiful. Every part of you beautiful, just the way you are. You do not need to change anything about yourself to be welcome here. Your skin, your hair, your belly, your limbs, your face, all beautiful, just the way they are. You are extraordinary. Each and every one of you, different from each, and beautiful in your own beautiful way. Breathtaking. Let us worship together. I invite you to rise in body or spirit to join our voices in our opening hymn, number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. Please remain standing as Ron and Rosemarie Meservey light our chalice with words of inspiration from the Oberlin UU Fellowship. We light this chalice to find inner peace, love for each other, and faith in ourselves. Also, to be welcoming to whoever we meet and kind to all living creatures. So gather around this light of hope as we share this time together. And we have a stewardship campaign update.
Is that centered? Alrighty, so our most recent numbers that I know are $144,190, which represents 87% of our goal. So, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Speaker. Okay.
Okay, what is our stewardship campaign theme this year? Yes, pearls along the path. Can anybody tell me briefly, in like a couple of sentences, how a pearl is made? Oh, Ron.
By some irritating little thing that kind of aggregates stuff around it.
Okay, so what we've heard is by some irritating little thing that aggravates stuff around it. So the insides of the oyster or mollusk are sensitive, right? They're soft and sensitive. And then what happens? Maybe one more sentence. Does Bernie?
Gradual secretion of the pearl material, larger and larger.
Okay, gradual secretion of the pearl material. And it gets larger and larger and it becomes a pearl. Okay, we'll keep this in mind for later during the sermon. We'll want to know about that. And now it's time for our story for all ages. Wow, that's a relief. We'll see what happens when I go down here with it. All right, we have no children here today so far, but if anyone would like to come forward and sit on the floor, all right, this is called I Am Me, a book of authenticity by Susan Verde with art by Peter H. Reynolds. There are things about me that make me different. Sometimes I stand out in a crowd. Sometimes I am not seen at all, and I feel alone. I start to ask myself, why can't I blend in, fit the mold? Maybe I am too little, or maybe too much. But when I stop and look, I see nothing in this world is exactly the same. Different is what makes life beautiful and miraculous. And when I show up, and when I show who I truly am, I can find my joy, my spark. I have something to contribute. I can't hold back or hold it in. I am someone to be celebrated. I am me. I can have my own style and decide how I want to show up in the world. I can be grateful for my hair, my skin, my size, because they are all me. I can be proud of my body and thankful for all it can do. I can embrace that I am perfectly imperfect, because that is what makes me interesting. Now here's written out a little sound of what a sound a violin makes when a beginner plays it, and I would ask the kids if they were here to make that sound, but there are no kids here, so can anybody make a sound, or can all of you make a sound? Like what a beginner sounds like on a violin. Excellent. I know, having had a beginner violin in my house at one point. I can dance to my own rhythm anytime I want to move and groove. I can learn from others who express themselves with confidence, even when it's hard. I can be a role model for someone who is afraid to show their own true colors. I can celebrate the things in this world that I decide are most meaningful to me. And the ones displayed here are love, peace, unity, and hope. I can love anyone I choose, fully and completely, with all my heart. I can notice that every creature, small and grand, has something unique and necessary. I can know that community, connection, and acceptance exist, and I will find them. I can surround myself with those who see me, stand up for me, and support me. I can be okay knowing not everyone will understand me because I have love for myself. I don't need to hide away, hold back, or compare myself to anyone else because I am me and I matter. And there's one more sound effect. Sound of a lion roaring. Can we do that? Yeah, good. You are you, and you matter. We are just right. Beautiful and miraculous, exactly the way we are. Please rise to sing our musical response. The more we get together, the words are printed in your order of service. Please remain seated for our prayer hymn, number 1011, Return Again. During the silence that follows the spoken prayer, you're invited forward to light a candle for whatever you hold in your heart today. We lift up Rosemary's brother, Nick Nichols, who's in rehab in Connecticut, awaiting surgery. And let us pray with the words of Lynn Cox. Spirit of life, ancestor of the stars and the sun, you who embrace the vastness of space and us along with it, be with us today. Hold us in our worry, our exhaustion, our grief. Keep us close as we sit with our truth, whatever that may be. Lead us to rest in the quiet, to find solace and renewal in this time of shifting light and dark. You whose arms open with the spinning galaxies, help us to make room as you do for all that is. Open our hearts to our loved ones, our neighbors, the beings with whom we share this planet. Lead us to reach out to others in compassion. Turn us toward one another in mercy, right relationship, and reconciliation. You who have seen the rising and setting of suns, of seasons, of civilizations, remind us of all that we have learned from the history of the world and from our own histories. Give us the courage to face our mistakes and to repair them whenever possible. Help us to understand our interdependence, our gravitational relatedness with all of the other spinning lives around us, and lead us to treat those relationships with care. In this space filled with the people among us who shine like stars, this space filled with the sparkle of love and care, we give thanks for this moment to be together. May our senses be open to the beauty of this day, this season, this world. We continue our contemplation in silence. Amen. In the words of Judith Meyer, Anne Sexton wrote, "Look to your heart that flutters in and out like a moth. God is not indifferent to your need. You have 1,000 prayers, but God has one." We give thanks for those moments when we can feel that we live in a world that is not indifferent to our need. We all have so many needs, 1,000 prayers, 1,000 needs that really only need one answer. Let the world not be indifferent. And may we live and be with each other in the way that shows this truth, whatever the day brings, that neither are we indifferent to each other. The offering will be received with grateful appreciation. For those of you watching the service online, you may contribute to a virtual offering plate using the donate button on the website or by mailing a check to the church office. Will the ushers please come forward? Church community and its wider concerns, we give thanks. The words of Laverne Cox. It is revolutionary for any trans person to choose to be seen and visible in a world that tells us we should not exist. From Confessional by Alok Vadmenon. I wish I could love myself out of systemic oppression. Trauma is a structure, not a feeling. Gentleness in Living by Richard S. Gilbert. Be gentle with another. It is a cry from the lives of people battered by thoughtless words and brutal deeds. It comes from the lips of those who speak them and the lives of those who do them. Who of us can look inside another and know what is there of hope and hurt, or promise and pain? Who can know from what far places each has come, or to what far places each may hope to go? Our lives are like fragile eggs. They crack and the substance escapes. Handle with care. Handle with exceedingly tender care, for there are human beings within. Human beings as vulnerable as we are, who feel as we feel, who hurt as we hurt. Life is too transient to be cruel with one another. It is too short for thoughtlessness, too brief for hurting. Life is long enough for caring. It is lasting enough for sharing, precious enough for love. Be gentle with one another. Please rise and body your spirit to join our voices in hymn number 1014, Answering the Call of Love. We're singing Masked, and you'll notice this title differs from the previous title printed in the hymnal. Per authorization of the hymn writer, we'll sing Answering the Call of Love in place of Standing on the Side of Love, and we'll sing all the other lyrics as printed. My sister Julie is a skilled seamstress. One year in the early 1980s, she gifted me for Christmas a blouse she'd sewed for me. I appreciated both the workmanship and the thought that went into the shirt. The color was an earthy off-white color that suited my tastes, and it was made of a nice, soft, flowing fabric. It had these big flouncy ruffles around the neck and down the front. If I remember correctly, it was trimmed with big lace. I could not wear that thing. I felt bad about it because I admired that blouse in the abstract, and because Julie had put time and energy into it, and I could see why she thought I would like it. I could see where it would look nice on someone else. I could even see where someone else might think it looked all right on me. But I wouldn't have felt like myself wearing it. I would have felt inauthentic, like I was posing as someone I wasn't, or walking around in someone else's skin. While I lived halfway across the country from all my family, at the time my younger sister, Shelley, lived near our older sister. Apparently, having seen the garment either while or after Julie was sewing it, Shelley mentioned to me over the phone how beautiful the blouse was. I truly wished I could give it to her because she would have happily worn it. But I felt that it would be a huge faux pas. So it sat in my closet until I finally donated it somewhere. Fast forward to a decade or so later. I was on a DC Metro train with a female friend. I was wearing a loose-fitting tie-dye dress. My friend remarked on what I was wearing, saying, "When I dress like that, I feel like I lose power." What I heard when she said that was, "I think clothing like that makes you lose power." Although I didn't think it was conscious, I felt it was kind of a takedown. Looking back at it now, however, I think I should have taken it more at face value. I don't think it was about me. I think she meant exactly what she said. When I dress like that, I feel like I lose power. When I dressed like that, in loose flowing tie-dyed clothing, I felt like I gained freedom. Big ruffles and lace on me are another story. That says nothing about someone else wearing them. Are there ways that you're just not comfortable presenting yourself that would be fine and dandy for someone else? If so, I ask you to keep that in mind as we reflect on visibility and vulnerability. This coming Friday, March 31st, is International Transgender Day of Visibility. In this connection, I'd like to hold up the experience of people who defy society's expectations around gender, and to highlight their contributions in loosening the constraints imposed on us all by assumptions around gender. For purposes of this sermon, I'll be focusing more on gender nonconformance than on transgender experience specifically. My son Basil recently gave me 2 books by writer, activist, and performance artist Alok Vadmenon. Alok, who uses singular they pronouns, identifies as gender nonconforming, gender fluid, queer, trans, transfeminine, and non-binary. If this sounds complicated, let it be known that, seeing the author identified on the internet by so many different terms, I felt confused and had to look Alok up on the non-binary wiki. I don't know whether it needs to be said, but I'll pause here to say it in case it does. All transgender people don't necessarily feel more authentically themselves by appearing in the guise society expects of someone of the sex they were not born into. In other words, Alok's identity as transfeminine doesn't mean they desire to take on the appearance of what we're enculturated to think a woman looks like. Alok has not chosen to medically transition and generally doesn't remove their body hair. One of Alok's books is a collection of poetry titled Femme in Public. I'd like to read an abridgment of one of the poems from this collection. The full poem has 9 verses of varying lengths. I'll read just 4 of the verses. I'll also be editing 1 word for profanity. As I read, I ask you to do 2 things. To keep in mind how the wrong clothing can make me or you feel like an imposter, and to notice how you feel as I read from the poem. Street tax. 1. Today, a man on the street pointed to me and said, "What the hell is that?" I wanted to turn around, tell him that I got this dress on sale, and I got this body for free. But you have been making me pay for them ever since. 2. When cis women tell me to shave if I want to look like a real woman, I remember that men are so lazy, they make women do the work of patriarchy for them. I smile back, say, "No, thank you," by which I mean, what could be more real than this? 6. To the 4 trans women who pointed and laughed at me, shouting, "What the bleep do you think you're doing? Is this what we are fighting for, to be on the other side of the joke?" I wonder, when they see us see ourselves like this, who gets the last laugh? 7. C. You on the 2 train downtown reading a book. Strategy. Looking down means you don't have to watch them watch you. Rationale. They will forget you. You will never forget them. Q. Child. Why are his nails painted? Boys aren't supposed to do that. 6 more stops. Lose place in book. Q. Mom. Boys can do whatever they want. Strategy. Pretend not to notice. 5 stops. Cue child screaming, "Mommy, it's not right. Boys don't do that." 4 stops. Cue train amused. Cue train smiling. Child, "Look, everyone, look." Cue nervous smile. Strategy. Laughing at yourself makes them more comfortable with you. Strategy. Laughing at yourself makes you more comfortable with you. Rationale. Why would anyone want to look like you? 3 stops. Cue Mom. You better be quiet or that man is going to attack us. 2 stops. Cue conspicuous body. Cue Adam's apple. I mean, cue original sin. Cue frenzied breath. Cue palpitating heart. Cue churning stomach. 1 stop. Cue 2 big hands. Cue 2 big shoulders. Cue 2 big gall. How dare he leave the house? How dare he take the train? How dare he be? Or rather, how dare he she? How dare he she? Strategy, do nothing. Rationale, your beauty is their beast. Your victim is their villain. Walk out. Do not look back. I repeat, do not look back. What does it mean to be visible? When you're visible, you're putting yourself out there, allowing yourself to be vulnerable. In a piece titled, "Perhaps Life Would Be Easier If I Shaved, But Why?" on the BBC News website, Alok writes, "When you're gender nonconforming, you're never safe from bullying. There are no spaces where I can truly feel at peace. There is a crucial distinction for trans people between being made visible and choosing to be visible. Visibility is the reason we experience violence online and in public. The truth is, every single day I get hateful messages from trolls on my social media. It's terrifying to receive such abuse. Studies have found that trans people have extremely high rates of post-traumatic stress disorder from constant harassment. It has made me extremely anxious, and I constantly feel threatened. It means that even when I'm alone or among friends, I still have traces of stress. Anxiety can be painful. It has had an impact on my body, manifesting as chronic pain and joint pain." End of that quotation. Imagine the level of wrongness you'd have to feel in a more conforming guise to choose this level of vulnerability over a less conspicuous appearance. This month, we're exploring vulnerability as a spiritual path, crucial in helping us to, in words from the Soul Matters Sharing website, birth a new normal worthy of our hopes. I feel that one shining feature of a new normal worthy of our hopes must be that everyone's worth and dignity are recognized when their outsides reflect their insides. And I think a critical element of co-creating this new normal is embracing those who make themselves vulnerable as trailblazers on this path. This may, and in fact probably will, involve paying attention to any sense of disconnect we personally experience when we're met with someone whose authentic self-expression rubs up against some of our most firmly ingrained notions of what goes together. I'm sure we'll all agreed on the principle of each person's inherent worth and dignity, and that no one should be treated cruelly for how they look. Those beliefs don't necessarily make us immune to any squeamish feelings of dissonance that might arise when deeply rooted conventions are visually challenged. But doing our part in birthing a world where people are not bullied and harassed for being who they are requires us first to sit honestly with what arises when our expectations are upended. Only after processing those feelings can we question their basis and move from, I would never hurt someone, to, how can I help? That's the feeling piece. The part where the oyster senses a little irritant, something that feels foreign. And rather than ejecting that bit, it forms something beautiful inside itself. Another step in birthing this new and more just normal is to engage intellectually, asking why. Why do people feel it's okay to abuse someone for visibly aligning their outer expression with their inner self in gender nonconforming ways? Let's look at a few reasons. One is a sense that some people's feelings don't matter or don't matter so much. This is simple othering and doesn't actually make much sense. Since there are as many ways of being human as there are humans, no one can be other than most everyone else. Another excuse for punishing those who don't conform to expectations around gender expression is the notion that the gender binary is how things have always been. A reasonable length sermon doesn't allow for an in-depth treatment of gender in history or prehistory, but the late sociologist Alan G. Johnson sums it up briefly in his book, The Gender Knot, writing, "Given thousands of years of patriarchal history, it's easy to slide into the belief that things have always been this way. Even thousands of years, however, are a far cry from what always implies, unless we ignore the more than 90% of humanity's time on Earth that preceded it." This is the way things have always been doesn't always make something better. To sharpen the light on this, let's focus on a shorter time frame and consider some things that look disturbingly wrong to, say, people of my grandparents' generation. Women and girls wearing pants in the workplace, school, or church. Jeans worn by anyone in those same places. Female doctors, female ministers, Elvis's hip movements. Many of us here can conjure recollections of the for real revulsion that such things once evoked. And let's not forget the Beatles' scandalously long hair. And I am referring to the length of their mop tops in the early 60s. In an article on JSTOR Daily titled "The High School Hair Wars of the 1960s, author Matthew Wills recounts, "The arguments against long-haired boys in high school had to do with tradition and the authority of the adults running the schools. But there was also a strong strain of sex panic in the opponent's side that sounds much like our contemporary debate over transgender bathroom access. Long hair meant you couldn't tell the boys from the girls. Long-haired boys would sneak into the girls' room, and ultimately chaos would result from the blurred gender lines." Sounds a little familiar, right? Closely aligned with and intertwined with the "it's been this way since time immemorial" argument are assertions to the effect of "it isn't natural." This argument is supposedly based on biology. I'd like to turn here to Alan G. Johnson, the sociologist I quoted earlier. I'll quote him here at some length. Why cultures would include two categories, male and female, isn't hard to see, since no society can continue without reproducing its human population, and it takes males and females to do it. But it's one thing to make a clear distinction, and quite another to give it cosmic importance, as if who people are as female or male were at the core of their lives, the linchpin of personal identity, and the rock foundation of society and social life. From a strictly biological perspective, it's hard to see what all the fuss is about, since what actually makes us male or female depends on a tiny bit of genetic information out of all the other factors, genetic and otherwise, that shape who we are. This doesn't mean that reproduction doesn't matter. It does suggest, however, that the obsession with sex and gender isn't based on some vital interest in human reproduction. What this obsession does serve is the interests of patriarchy, which uses it to anchor the whole idea of a male-dominated, male-identified, and male-centered society. After all, if we were human beings first and women or men second, the patriarchal order wouldn't make much sense. Patriarchy, not some inherent human condition, requires that gender assume mythic proportions and take its place as the most defining and confining human characteristic, one that dwarfs all others by comparison. This is true of most oppressive systems. End of that lengthy quotation from Johnson. This isn't about biology. It's about holding together an invisible structure. There's nothing natural or inherently right about our gender binary and approved gendered presentations. And we could all point to times in our history when atrocities have been justified in the name of what's natural and therefore pure, and what's unnatural and therefore innately perverse. One more excuse used for directing cruelty at gender nonconforming people's visibility is the "you can be who you want to be in private, but why do you have to put it in my face?" argument. In other words, I'll tolerate your existence if you'll slink back into the closet. This line of reasoning stems from the sense that the observer's feelings matter above all else. And that's not true. That's the intellectual piece, asking why and trying to understand it. We may be tempted to stop here, but we need to move on to actions, to ways of being in the world. Like fish, we're all immersed in the water we're swimming in. If someone sticks a hand above the surface and says, "Hey, there's something else out there," do we say, "Nope, it's water all the way up"? If others gather round and guffaw and poke fun at how silly this swimmer looks with their hands sticking straight up, do we look the other way and swim by? For change to happen, someone has to be on the front lines, daring visibility and exposure. The prevailing power of gender norms and the pressure to conform to them confine us all. Gender nonconforming people are taking the brunt of the impact of disrupting this web of assumptions. I think we do well to protect and uphold those who risk making themselves visible in this way, challenging assumptions because keeping their true selves invisible isn't tolerable. But given the pervasiveness and invisibility of this medium we live in, how can we each make a difference regardless of our own comfort level with today's conventional gender expressions? Possibilities abound, and my time here is limited. And resistance is next month's theme. But in The Gender Knot, Alan G. Johnson points out that part of a system's ability to perpetuate itself lies in offering participants paths of least resistance. People tend to follow these paths because they're familiar and predictable, because it's harder to traverse a path with more resistance, and because they don't see that other paths exist. One thing that we can practice that's quite powerful, even though we won't always see the effect play out, is bringing alternative paths to light. This might be as simple as saying, I don't see it that way. Or, gee, I was just thinking how nice that dress looks on you. The more uncomfortable we can make the well-trodden path, the less likely others are to take it. Here's a place where we may get stuck on the treadmill of the intellectual piece. We may go straight from gaining some understanding ourselves to persuasion, telling people why they're wrong, which might compel the oyster to violently eject the too painful irritant. I don't think oysters can actually do that, but trying to change people's minds is harder than softening hearts by offering a glimpse of another way of being, and mind-changing efforts are more likely to produce counter-resistance. Instead, we can be like the foreign bit that's just enough to prod the mollusk to begin pearl formation. As we can form pearls within ourselves, we can also be pearl seeds in society and situations, providing just enough disruption to things as usual, producing just enough of an itch that an adjustment is made to make things feel better. And eventually, something beautiful emerges. I think we can carry this pearl image forward in the coming months as we walk the paths of resistance in April to creativity in May, and land in June on the path of delight. To close, I want to borrow a final time from the words of Alan G. Johnson. If the main requirement for the perpetuation of evil is that good people do nothing, then the choice isn't between all or nothing, but between nothing and something. In the face of unnecessary cruelty aimed at people for being visibly who they are, let's do something. Amen. Please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 1053, How Could Anyone? As we leave this sacred space and go forth into the sacred world, may our hearts be as our chalice cup, open to receive, gently, softly, lightly, to surround in sheltering embrace, to lift up and let shine. And may our hearts be as our chalice flame, welcoming, casting warmth, and a soft light of visibility, letting all who come into our presence be at ease in their own skin, in their wholeness, warming us with their unique radiance. Go in peace, gentleness, and love. Amen.